Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to paint liquid drips. Now the miniatures I'm using for this is one of the Blight Lord Terminators, and it's the drips from the plague spewer that he's carrying. But we'll be showing a few pictures of different drips using the same technique on different Blight Lord Terminators. So the first colour we're going to use is Citadel Moot Green, and we're using this because it's quite a bright bilious green colour. We're doing these like the drips on the plague spewer, so I want it to be quite a bright and kind of corrosive and horrible looking green. Listening to the Flight of the Eisenstein at the moment and describing the virus bombs as being filled with this hideous, very bright green liquid, so it kind of fits in with the stuff that they maybe had on those virus bombs. So we're just going to give that an overall coat of Moot Green, and then we can give it a shade. So this is how the big drips are looking from the plague spewer. As I mentioned earlier, I'm also doing some of the other Death Guard Terminators, so they have various sized drips on them, coming from the plague sword and the axe and things like that. So I'm going to be doing them as I go along, but you probably won't see them much until the very end of the pictures. So now that we've got the greens on them, we're going to use some Citadel Biel-Tan green to shade all of the drips. So as I say, you won't be seeing much of the other drips on the other Death Guard. We are going to be working on these. The reason we're using this on one of the bigger drips is to show you how it all fits and how it all fits together on a larger scale, and then you can shrink that down. Now the techniques that I'll be using on this are exactly the same as on the smaller drips, just obviously on a larger scale. So now we're going to reapply some Moot Green. What we want to be doing here is you want to be thinking about where you want the light reflections to be. So on this big drip at the back, the light is going to be reflecting and have on the right hand side of this drip that I'm doing here. So you want to be doing a reverse J of the Moot Green down that stream of goo and underneath this drip. And then when we put the spots of light at the end, they're going to be just to the right and up of where the brush is at the moment, so sort of diagonally upright from that bottom left part of the drip. So we're going to be leaving that darker with the Biel-Tan green. And then on this part that is running down here, you don't want to do the whole thing with one flat green colour. What you want to be doing is trying to get sections of it with the Moot Green and leaving sections of it with the Biel-Tan green as well. Certain areas of it you will be highlighting the whole thing, sort of where the drip comes away from the plague spewer, and it's got that long thin bit before the drip at the bottom. That thin bit there is going to be lighter in the middle and then get darker, but with the darkness towards the plague spewer, so like on the inside of it. So the drip that is coming down in front of the big drip at the back, I'm going to be doing the J, so it's like a regular J shape on that, so the light will be reflecting on the left hand side of it, whereas on the bigger drip it's going to be reflecting on the right hand side of it. When I say reflecting, I mean that it's going to have the darker area there with the spots of light within that dark area. We will be putting spots of light and streaks of light down different parts of the drips, but for this section this is where we want to be thinking about doing it. And the same for this front part here. It's going to be a normal shaped J on this side, and then when you turn that plague spewer around, you're going to do a reverse J to paint on the highlights on that side. At the front where it's actually coming out the barrel as well, I'm doing that in kind of streaks, so it's going to have like almost like 4 strands of gooey plague gunk coming out. Now adding a little bit of Vallejo White to the Moot Green, I'm going to start with the highlights. So again, we're going to be highlighting the areas that we've just done. So where you've put the Moot Green, you now want to be applying the lighter shade on top of that, leaving some of the previous Moot Green beneath it. Now as you're painting this, I tend to do the underside of this part of the drip will be the lighter colour, then you'll have a little sort of lip of Moot Green running all the way around the edge of that. And this downward part here, this is the bit I was talking about where we're going to be making this part so it's lighter in the middle. So as it's drooping from the plague spewer, it is going to be getting more light going through it, so we're going to make that a bit of a lighter colour. And this downward section here, I'm going to try and keep the lighter shades on the left hand side and have it slightly darker on the right. So that where it's coming out of the kind of brass ball thing at the top there. You'll see a bit more here as well. I'm trying to do the normal shaped J on this little one so that those reflections are almost facing each other. just to give an example of doing them both in different directions. So in these sections where I'm speeding up, the only thing that's happening there is I'm painting the other drips in the same style as this one here, so I didn't really see the point in having both drips being painted up when it's exactly the same as this part here. As I say, the smaller drips that are on the other Light Lord Terminators that I'm painting up, they are a lot smaller than on these ones, so whereas I'm using the Citadel medium layer brush here, because it has got a wicked point on it, I'll be using the Army Painter Wargamer character brush to do those because the drips are significantly smaller, so you want that finer point on it. Now at the top here, you can see where it's coming out of the Plague Spear, it gets thinner. As I said earlier, I'm going to be doing that as almost like 4 strands of goo, or 4 ridges in the goo. So they will be getting highlighted as we go along, and I'll show you a little bit later a bit of slow time footage of the last couple of highlights, or the last highlight going on to that. So now we're going to add a little bit of Vallejo White to the previous mix, and we're going to do that highlighting once again. Now the same as the last highlight, you want to make sure that the previous layers are visible underneath this one, so you're leaving a little lip of the previous colours around the edges of this one. You can almost see the lighting coming into play on these now, with where the highlights and the shaded areas are. If you do happen to get any Moot green or any of the highlights on areas that you don't really want them in, then you can just go over it with the previous highlight if needed, or the previous colour. Or if it's just on one of the areas and you've got the standard Moot green on there, the very last layer that we do is going to be a little bit of Biel-Tan green shade, just to darken the areas around where we're putting those spots of light reflection. And all that does is darken it down and gives it that kind of gem or reflective effect where it's lighter on one side and you've got the light highlights there, and then the little spots of light reflecting on the darker area too. I know they did Lord Felthius a while back. I've got the Blight Lord Terminator that looks almost like a big fly with the autocannon. So if you want to see him getting painted up soon, give us a shout out in the comments. I'll get him on the list. He's actually waiting in a little bit where I keep all the miniatures that I want to work on soon. I'll be working on a Death Guard Rhino in the coming weeks too, because I can show quite a few effects on that. So I'll be coming up soon on that. It's going to take a bit of time to do because obviously the surface areas and the brush paint everything, so it's going to be a little bit longer probably than most videos, but it'll be worth it in the long run. Now we're going to use a little bit of Vallejo White to highlight that previous mix once more, and we're just going to be adding another highlight to this one. Now you can really see the areas where the shades and the highlights are coming into play here. It's starting to look a little bit more liquid and a little bit more reflective. And using a thinner brush and smaller amount of paint, this is the effect that you're going to be doing on the tiny little drips on the other things too. This is the effects that I did on More Slug, who is coming up on Wednesday. And I'll give you an idea of when I'm painting the drips, and you just get that little brief section of the different highlights and things like that. This is the technique that goes into painting each of the drips on More Slug, or anyone who's got the drips on them. Looking at the colours on these fellas, because I started painting them that long ago, I can't actually remember which colours I'm using on them. I think that's beige brown for the leather parts dangling down from the shoulders and the groin there. That's model air rust on the brassy kind of colours. But that flesh tubing at the back, I don't think that's one of the flesh colours that I tend to use much anymore. I think that's one of the Vallejo ones that I used to use a lot in the earlier videos. Try and use a bit more Citadel colours for the Citadel miniatures now. So you can see here that this is painting on the highlight on that front part of the drip, and you could see where it's doing the 4 little strands I was talking about earlier. So I've left this in to show you how the front's looking and how we're painting that. It is exactly the same as the one at the back. It's obviously just at the front of the gun and not at the back of the gun. So I'll speed through this bit. You can see that little strings at the top of the gun there, at the top of the barrel. We can move on to the next colour. So this is the final highlight to them, and this is going to be the light reflections. So we are going to use just pure Vallejo White. What we want to do here is I'm going to try and do 1 or 2 spots on each of the drips. In that middle of the dark area there, you just want to put a little spot of light. Try to put a second spot there, didn't quite work, and you've simply got 1 large spot, but that doesn't matter too much. 1 large spot or 2 smaller spots is fine. You want to try and get a little line of reflection. I'm using the Army Painter Wargamer character brush here because you want these to be as thin as you can. Probably could do with using a new one because this one's been through the battles a bit and isn't quite as pointy as it once was. But you can still get a decent straight line with it, you can still get a decent thin line with it. So I'm still using it for the time being. So painting a straight line down the side there to represent light reflecting off the gooey liquid. Do another little spot on the smaller drip there. We want to do that curved light reflection on the bottom of that drip too. On this side we're going to do another light reflection running down the back. Now I do quite a lot of long thin light reflections here. You can break that up with a little darker bit and a spot of light beneath or above it or in the middle of it. It doesn't really matter too much as long as you're getting those nice and straight and as thin as you can. I'm just going for another little reflection of light here. The reason I'm doing this is just so that if you're looking at it from the back or the sides, I'm trying to get it so that those are the areas that you may be more likely to see it. You will have that light reflection look on it. And if you see it from an angle, you sort of get a mixture of both, and it looks decent like that too. As I say, it's a very easy technique to do, it just takes a bit of time, a bit of patience, and a bit of practice as well. But if you do these on all of the drips, you will pick it up. It's a very similar technique to use on Space Marine eye lenses too, or anything like that, gemstones and that kind of thing. So a bit of a light reflection on the inside, on the darker spot here. I'm going to extend that one down the side as well, like so. Now we're just going to work on the front drip here and add those light reflections. You can see that back part there isn't quite as dark as the ones on the other side. The other side looks a lot better in terms of the darkness to lightness. So I'll be using a little bit of Biel-Tan green to darken up that area where those spots of light were. A little bit of light reflection of the liquid coming out there. And a bit of a line down the front and the side. And curving underneath that part. Now you can see on that bigger drip it looks a lot better because it's darker. So all we're going to do in the next layer is come back with a bit of Biel-Tan green and darken that other side up, and that'll give it that deep light reflection on the drip. So here we go with the Biel-Tan green. All we're going to do is where we've got those spots of light and you've got a bit of Moot green going a bit too high there, we're going to use the Wargamer character brush again from Army Painter, and we're just going to go around those spots of light. Darken them up a little bit. While you're waiting for it to dry, if you keep trying to do the same bit, your brush will be absorbing some of the shade and you'll be not quite getting the effect that you want on there. So all you want to do is leave that to dry, work on another one, put the Biel-Tan green around that, and then once it's dried you can come back to the original one and keep touching that up. And that's the process that you do for each of these areas that you're darkening up. You want to hop between them all, just so you're giving them each time to dry before you're putting on the next layer. So you can see already they're looking a lot better because they've got the darker shade around where the spot of light is. So we're going to do this on the other side too, darken up some parts of these drips. And then at the front, this is the main one I thought. You can see it's darker around them. Then we'll be darkening up that front one too. So this is the finished result and what you'll be left with at the end. And then following on the outro, you're going to have a few pictures of the other drips too. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media linked below. Thanks very much. If you like the channel and you enjoy the content and you'd like to support us, please head to our Ko-fi page below where you can buy us a brew. Thanks very much.